So now we're cover some of the business provisions. I apologize, I kind of smashed my bullet points together here on this page to try and get all my credits, these 3 credits on one page. So we'll go through some of these credits. The employee retention credit was part of the CARES Act. The other two credits on here, the credit for paid sick leave and the credit for family leave, were part of a separate act that was passed just before the CARES Act. And we'll go through some of those provisions. So as part of the CARES Act, there are 3 credits that as part of the legislation, there are 3 credits that employees are able to avail themselves of. And they basically provide a refund or a credit against Social Security taxes that would normally be due, and withholding taxes that would normally be due when filing the quarterly 941 form or withholding reporting form for the IRS. So the employee retention credit provides a refundable credit to eligible employers, right, of up to 50% of qualified wages to employees who are not working due to employer's full or partial shutdown under orders from a governmental authority or significant decline in gross receipts. Okay, so this is why I love my job. This sentence has 4 or 5 definable terms in it that you need to go find out what the definition is, right? So we have an eligible employer, qualified wages, significant decline, right? So we've got what are all of those things and how do they all work, right? So again, these were things that were implemented, and then we had to wait for guidance and some follow-up on to find out what those definitions would be or how Congress wanted them to be defined. So under the employee retention credit, there's a credit available for wages paid between March 12th of 2020 and before January of 2021, right? So there's your qualified wages, right? So if you're paying wages, including healthcare, to eligible employees, you would qualify for the credit as long as those wages were paid during this time period. The credit is a refundable credit, and you can apply for it when, as I mentioned, when you file your 941 form. The maximum wage and benefit, and therefore the credit, is limited to $10,000 in aggregate per employee for all quarters that you're infected. So you can see here that the credit is very large. And again, the intention of the act, especially the CARES Act, was to keep people employed. And it was really it's very large hurdle for employers to get over the fact that I need to keep people employed even though I might not have work. And that is really prevalent when we get to the Paycheck Protection Program. But here you have a situation where I'm paying people who are not working or are impacted by COVID, and I can get a credit for paying those wages, but I might be in a situation from a business standpoint where I can't even keep employees around. And we've, part of the congressional acts that they passed was also an extension of the amount of benefits that unemployed people were able to get. They threw everybody an extra $600 a week kicker on top of their unemployment. And that is making it difficult to get people off of unemployment now. There are, that you're talking about people that were making potentially less than $50,000 a year in their jobs that are now making the equivalent of close to $50,000 a year just by being unemployed. So for an employer to spend money to keep an employee on payroll, maybe be able to avail themselves of the credit, is difficult if the employee would be better off on unemployment. Further down, one of the defining bullet points there, in significant decline in gross receipts. Significant decline begins with the first quarter in 2020 for which your gross receipts are less than 50% of the same quarter for 2019. So you would look at the first quarter of 2020 compared to the first quarter of 2019. If my gross receipts are down 50% or more, I've got a significant decrease in my wages, and I would be able to qualify for this credit. How long can I do that? Well, I qualify as long as my gross receipts remain below 80% of the gross receipts for the same quarter in 2019. So if I go below 50, I qualify, and then I check each quarter. And once I exceed 80% of gross receipts for the same quarter in 2019, I'm kicked off of credit eligibility. The two credits that were not included in the CARES Act, but were included in a Paid Sick Leave and Family Leave Act just before the CARES Act was issued, are the credit for paid sick leave and the credit for paid family leave. So employers with fewer than 500 employees are allowed a credit against the employer's portion of Social Security, again, for each quarter. 100% of the qualified leave wages paid for the calendar quarter under the 100% of the qualified wages can be the credit, and the qualified wages are limited to, on a per day, per employee basis for sick pay, and it can range from $200 a day to a $2,000 aggregate or 10 days of coverage to $511 per day to $5,110 of aggregate coverage. Whether you're subject to the $200 wage limit or the $500 wage limit depends on generally a direct COVID impact versus an indirect COVID impact. So if I've been tested positive, I've been quarantined, or I've been diagnosed as having COVID, I would be eligible for a $500 per day sick leave, and for up to 10 days. And if I were taking care of somebody, or I had to stay home because my child didn't have daycare, I would be subject to $200 per day of sick leave, and I could get up to 10 days, $2,000 of coverage. If I'm the employer, I can benefit from that. So these wages, you cannot double dip these wages for purposes of the Paycheck Protection Program, which we'll get to in a minute. So if you're paying people under this provision, you can't use those wages as part of your qualifying wages and payroll costs for the Paycheck Protection Program. Credit for family leave, very similar to the paid sick leave. However, the Family Leave Act covers a significant longer period of time, 50 days of family leave. So you can see I can get up to $200 per day per employee and up to $10,000 of aggregate wages per employee for 10 weeks. And again, I can't double dip those wages. Any questions on these credits at all? Great. I noticed, I've talked to a couple of payroll providers, Paychex, Heartland, whatever the case, ADP. They are really on top of these credits. I believe they're, if you're paying somebody sick leave, they are calculating the credits and letting you know that they're on top of it. But what you have to watch out for, again, is where you're at on your Paycheck Protection Program, right? If you really want to use those wages as your job costs, you can't take the credit. So it's really a dollar for dollar trade-off. I'm either going to get the credit or I'm going to get the loan forgiveness on the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. So if you feel that your wages are going to be adequate on the Paycheck Protection loan program side, and you're going to satisfy the requirements, which we'll talk about shortly over there, then you might be able to continue to get the credit and get the Paycheck Protection Loan Purpose, our Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness.